My life has always smelled like French fries, pizza, and cheap coffee. I've been working as a food delivery driver for almost 2 years now, and let me tell you, this job drains every ounce of energy you have. Always on the move, rain, snow, or scorching heat. People order food no matter what, and they don't care if you've been riding for 10 straight hours without a break. But the worst part isn't the exhaustion. The worst part is the customers. Some are kind, polite, even generous with tips. But others look at you like you're not even human, just a delivery guy they can insult or yell at because all you do is bring food. One evening I was late. Not my fault, traffic jams, red lights, and the GPS messing up the route. I was only 5 minutes behind. Just 5. But that was all it took to start the worst night of my entire job. I remember standing outside the customer's building. A tall, modern apartment complex with glass doors and polished tiles. I checked the receipt again. Extra large pepperoni pizza, garlic bread, chicken wings, 2 bottles of Coke. A family-sized dinner, all packed neatly in the insulated bag hanging on my shoulder. I took a deep breath, tried to shake off the nerves, and knocked. The door swung open almost instantly. A man in his late 30s stood there, tall, well-dressed, with a gold watch flashing on his wrist. His expression was pure annoyance. "You're late," he said flatly, without even greeting me. I forced a smile. "Sorry sir, traffic was rough tonight. Here's your order." But before I could even finish, he cut me off. "Late is late. I don't care about your excuses." His eyes narrowed as if I had personally offended him. "You delivery guys think this is some kind of joke? My food should have been here 10 minutes ago." I swallowed my frustration. I wanted to tell him that 5 minutes wasn't the end of the world, that at least his food was still hot. But I bit my tongue. In this job, arguing only makes things worse. "Again, I'm sorry," I said quietly, holding out the bag. "Your pizza and sides are all here. Still fresh." He didn't even take it. Instead, he leaned closer, glaring at me. "Do you know how this works?" he hissed. "I rate you. I decide whether you keep this job or not. You're basically begging me for stars, aren't you?" I froze. His words stung more than I expected. I'd dealt with rude people before, but something about the way he said it, like he had complete control over my life, made my blood boil. Still, I kept my voice steady. "Sir, I just want to deliver your food." That's when he did something I'll never forget. With a mocking grin, he grabbed the bag from my hands, not gently but like he was yanking it away on purpose. He pulled out the pizza box, opened it, and stared at it for a few seconds. Then, right there in front of me, he threw the entire pizza into the trash can next to his door. The garlic bread followed. Then the chicken wings. Finally, he took one of the Coke bottles, twisted it open, and deliberately poured it over the rest of the food, laughing as the fizzy liquid soaked everything. I stood there, frozen, watching a full meal worth nearly $50 go to waste. He looked at me again, his grin wider now. "That's what late food is worth. Garbage." And then he shoved the empty bag back into my chest. "1 star, he sneered. "You're lucky I don't report you for incompetence." My hands shook. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to say something, anything. But my throat was dry, and all I could do was stand there in silence. He slammed the door shut, and I was left staring at the polished wood, my reflection faintly visible in its glossy surface. In that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. It wasn't just about the food. It was the humiliation. The complete disregard for my effort, my time, my dignity. I walked back to my bike, the empty bag still in my hand, and sat there for a long moment. My phone buzzed, a notification from the app confirming the 1-star review. My performance score dropped instantly. Too many more like this and I'd lose my job. I clenched my fist. That man thought he could do whatever he wanted because I wore a uniform and carried food. He thought I was powerless, but he was wrong. That night, as I rode through the streets, the humiliation slowly turned into something else. Anger. And anger turned into a plan. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I swore to myself I would make him regret ever treating me that way. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The ride back to the restaurant depot felt longer than usual. The cold air bit against my cheeks, but it couldn't cool the fire burning inside me. That man, his arrogant grin, the way he wasted perfectly good food, the casual cruelty, it played in my head over and over again like a broken record. Most bad customers I could forget by the next day. But not him. No, this one had carved himself into my memory like a scar. I kept thinking, what gives him the right to treat me or anyone like that? I wasn't some faceless nobody. I had a name, a life, a beating heart. But to him I was just the delivery guy. Disposable. By the time I clocked out, I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to let it go. The idea came to me slowly, piece by piece, like building blocks. It had to be clever. I couldn't just yell at him or get physical. That would only get me fired or worse, arrested. No, my revenge had to hit him exactly where he'd hit me. His pride, his comfort, his status. That night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, scrolling through the delivery app on my cracked phone. I studied how orders worked, how addresses were registered, how payment systems processed requests. And then it hit me. I didn't need to hurt him. I just needed to make him taste his own medicine. So I tested something. Using the scheduled delivery feature, I placed a small order, but instead of my address, I entered his. Everything went through smoothly. My account got charged, but the system didn't care who the recipient was, as long as the address matched a real location. My heart pounded. It worked. For the next few days I played it safe. I watched him from a distance whenever I had deliveries in his neighborhood. He was always the same, rude to staff, snapping at neighbors, honking his car horn like he owned the street. Each sighting made my anger sharper. Each reminder pushed me closer to acting. Finally, on a Friday night, when the streets were alive with weekend orders, I made my move. I placed an order under his address, not small this time but massive. Enough food to feed an entire office party. 3 large pizzas, multiple burgers, fries, salads, desserts, and drinks. Over $100 worth. I double-checked the details. His apartment number. His phone number. All accurate. But the payment? Oh, that was the trick. I made sure the system billed it directly to his account, tied through the delivery app. It wasn't hard. The guy had probably saved his payment info without a second thought. When the order went through, I almost laughed out loud. And then came the sweetest part. I accepted the delivery myself. The bags were heavy, warm, and smelled incredible. My coworkers at the restaurant depot gave me curious looks as I loaded everything onto my bike, but I just smiled. The ride to his building was like no other. Every turn of the wheels, every streetlight I passed, made my grin grow wider. When I arrived, I knocked on his door just like before. This time he didn't open immediately. After a moment, the door cracked open and he appeared, dressed in a robe, holding a glass of wine, his expression lazy and irritated. "What now?" he muttered, already annoyed. "Delivery for you," I said calmly, lifting the heavy bags. His eyes flickered in confusion. "I didn't order anything." I shrugged. "It's under your name. Paid in full." He frowned, took the bags reluctantly, and slammed the door in my face. I could hear his muffled voice inside, yelling to someone, probably his wife or a guest. Confusion, anger, frustration. It was music to my ears. But that was only the beginning. The next night I did it again. Bigger order this time. Sushi platters, premium steaks, cakes, and more. Once again billed directly to his account. When I showed up, he looked furious. "I told you I didn't order this," he barked. I gave him the same calm smile. "But it's your name. Your address. Paid in full." His face turned red. He tried to argue, but the system didn't lie. Once again he was forced to take the bags. By the third night, I could barely contain my laughter as I watched him explode in rage. He stormed out of his apartment, waving his phone, yelling about fraud and mistakes. But the beauty of it? The orders were legit. No fraud, no errors. Just his own information used against him. And the cherry on top? Every time I was the one delivering. He couldn't report me without admitting he'd been tricked. He couldn't stop the orders without canceling his account, which meant no more easy food deliveries for him. For once he felt powerless, just like he'd made me feel. And as I rode off into the night, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement, I finally felt the weight of that humiliation lift off my shoulders. This wasn't finished yet, not until I delivered the final blow. But watching him squirm, watching him suffer even a fraction of what he'd put me through, it was the sweetest revenge I'd ever tasted. By the time I hit the third night, it felt less like revenge and more like a ritual. I'd become an invisible hand that showed up at his door with more food than sense. I watched his face each time through a small window between deliveries, confusion, denial, anger, a slow burn of embarrassment. I kept thinking about that one-star plop that knocked my rating down, the way his laugh had landed against my throat like a hand. But a plan needs an ending. Small frustrations in his life piling up weren't enough. I wanted a moment that would land hard and clear. A moment everyone could see, a moment that stripped away his posture of invincibility and left him standing ridiculous and exposed. I arranged it carefully. I told no one the full story. A couple of colleagues knew there had been a rough night and gave me vague looks of solidarity, but I kept the details to myself. The jobs that matter are rarely done with witnesses. Sometimes you need quiet. On a Friday evening I placed the order that would close the loop. Not a prank, not a single invoice scattered across floors. A spectacle. I scheduled delivery for right after his building's weekly residents meeting. I'd seen that on the notice board when I scoped the place. People came together once a week in the lobby filled with neighbors who'd stand around and gossip and exchange news. Perfect stage. The order itself was ridiculous. Several party platters, a stack of plastic containers, dozens of drinks, a cake with "Congrats" written in uneven icing. It cost a small fortune. I had to juggle shifts and cash out tips and borrow a few bucks to cover the front, but none of that mattered. This needed to be beyond the petty. This needed to be unavoidable. I arrived 20 minutes early. I parked my bike on the other side of the street, clipped the thermal bag tight and watched. The lobby began to fill. Old ladies with shopping bags, young couples in gym clothes, a man with a stroller. They clustered by the notice board, laughing about banalities. He arrived, sweeping in like he owned every square inch of air, blazer sharp, hair perfected. He was with a woman, wife, girlfriend I didn't know and didn't care. He scanned the lobby and when his eyes landed on me, he assumed I was there for him. Confident. Comfortable. I knocked, held the bags, and when the door opened a crack he pushed it wider with a practiced impatience. "You again?" he said before I could speak. "Delivery for the residents' meeting?" I said and let the implication hang. He glanced at the labels. The name on the order wasn't his, but the building was the same. The system routed it to his block. He wasn't thinking of logistics, he was thinking only of discomfort. He frowned and took a plastic tray, then another, then a stack. People's eyes drifted from the notice board toward the doorway. Then the older woman I'd befriended for this, one of the neighbors who always complained about the noise he made with his car, waved me over. I stepped into the lobby, handed her a platter and said aloud, "We thought the meeting needed something special tonight." The woman smiled big, "How kind," and the room turned. Conversation faltered. Heads turned. He flushed. The energy shifted. One of the younger guys from down the hall, the one who walked his dog like he owned the pavement, stepped forward and pretended to check the delivery slip. He cocked an eyebrow and then, in a stage whisper loud enough for half the lobby to hear, "This says it was charged to apartment 14B. He looked directly at my target. And the room hummed. People nudged each other, eyes moved toward the number. Someone laughed, small and incredulous. The woman with the stroller joked, "Celebrating something, 14B? Small chuckles. He tried to smooth it over, to claim a mistake, to order people to take the trays into the meeting and not make a fuss. But it was like trying to hold back water with a paper cup. That night he had to explain to a roomful of neighbors how a banquet appeared at a community meeting with his building and his name tied to it. He muttered about fraud, about mistaken accounts, about how he'd call the company. But he couldn't make the awkwardness disappear. People replayed the little scenes in their heads. The way he'd thrown away a hot meal in front of a delivery guy, the way he'd used his power to shame another human. The cognitive dissonance made him smaller and people noticed. Gossip is a slow and particular kind of justice. It grows until you can't ignore it. The next day the app pinged me, a notification from an outreach line that I'd used once to report a scam years ago. Someone had flagged unusual account activity associated with his profile. It was a small bureaucratic thing, but it set off a chain. The delivery platform's review team reached out. The restaurant manager contacted their supervisor asking for clarity. Neighbors texted each other, forwarding photos they'd taken of him hauling boxes like he'd staged a party and then tried to pretend everything was normal. Within 72 hours his account was temporarily frozen pending verification. He had to unhook the one-star power he brandished so freely. He called customer support in a rage. He called the restaurant manager. He marched to the lost and found office like a man expecting a miracle. None came. There were no instant reinstatements for arrogance. It wasn't a police matter. It wasn't the scandal of a lifetime. It was smaller and therefore more intimate. A man used to getting what he wanted found himself unable to order with the same entitlement. His convenience, the thing he'd weaponized against others, failed him. More importantly, the neighbors who had once bowed to his audible arrogance now had license to comment in small ways. Doors that used to open for him were simply held shut. Conversations shifted when he entered a room. The soft social checks that keep everyday cruelty from becoming normal started nudging him. I watched from the other end of the street a few nights later when he left the building. He looked at his phone, tapping his thumb like someone calculating losses. He caught sight of me, and for a fraction of a second his face flickered between anger and the oddest thing, remorse. Maybe it was contrition, maybe it was the calculation of how far he'd fallen in 3 nights. He passed by without a word. I could have sent one last message, a flourish, but I didn't. The point of revenge, I'd learned, wasn't to crush until nothing remained. It was to rebalance. He had been arrogant enough to make it easy. I had been careful enough to avoid breaking laws or burning bridges. The ledger had shifted. In the weeks that followed, things settled back into an ordinary rhythm. I kept delivering. Lunches to office workers, late-night garlic bread to students. People were kinder, often offering small thanks and an extra coin. My rating climbed back up. The 1-star sat in my history like a faded bruise, visible but healing. Most nights now, when I ride through the city, I think about the small cruelties people accept as normal. I think about how easy it is to look away and how important it is, sometimes, to stand up, not with a shout but with quiet, stubborn measures. I won't say I'm proud of every line I crossed. Scheming and revenge leave marks on you as well. But I'll say this: the man who poured Coke over a hot meal learned that status isn't a shield. There are social currencies beyond money, and they can be reclaimed one delivery at a time. And sometimes, the sweetest part of it all is the silence that follows, the small, ordinary piece of doing your job and being treated like a person. That, more than any rating or public spectacle, felt like victory.